Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to live, work, and play. I'm Christina Egan, your host. Today, we're talking about how people with disabilities navigate our region's transportation system. I'm here today with two guests. First, with Sadie Donnell. She's a Gorham resident who is blind and has been a community transportation leader with the Greater Portland Council of Governments programs for many years. We're also here with Kevin Jensen, Gorham's Economic Development Director. If you have questions for Sadie or Kevin, please give us a call at 207-780-4909. Again, 780-4909. Sadie, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and welcome, Kevin. It's great to have you too.
Thank you. Good to hear.
Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start just by getting to know you a little bit. Kevin, I'll start with you. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. My parents are both from Iowa, but they moved to D.C., the D.C. area in the early 60s with my dad's job.
Yeah, and then what brought you to Maine?
Well, so I bounced around a little bit after college, but I was in New York before this for 10 years, and that's where I met my wife. So I'm the classic story of, met the Mainer, fall in love, and then when you start having your first child, you start looking at, places to go and to get out of the big city, and we were fortunate to come back this way to be closer to family.
I have the exact same story.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who have chosen Maine.
Yeah, we're boomerangs, apparently.
Boomerangs, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. And how about Sadie? How about you? Where did you grow up?
I have the kind of opposite story, actually. I grew up in southern Maine. Both sides of my family are actually from York. And when I was young, we moved up to North Berwick. So I graduated from the Noble school system. But I would never leave Maine. I love it here so much. I hope I never have to move away.
And you're both in Gorham. Tell us why you love Gorham.
I love Gorham. I've been in Gorham for, I think almost 15 years now. And I've lived in the Greater Portland area for probably close to 25 years. But we started coming out to Gorham because at first the rents were cheaper back when we first moved there.
That sounds like a long time ago now.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it, but yes. So when we first moved out there, it was to sort of save on rent. It was a little more suburban, and we just have loved having that size of a community. To me, it's just the right size. It's small enough that you still really get to know your neighbors and really make some really good connections through the schools and whatnot, but also large enough that there is that infrastructure like police and fire and transportation that really is beneficial all the way around.
Yeah, and Kevin, you work for the town of Gorham. Tell us why.
Well, I mean, I love the work that we do there. It's a little bit of everything. So we've got a agricultural heritage, we've got a pretty big industrial park, and then you've got the village atmosphere. So for the work that I do, it's just a little bit of everything that I get to get involved in. So my position is part of community development, so that allows me to kind of work on a number of different issues across the town. So it's a great little town. It's my little sandbox for where I work, and but all the people there are great, and it's just a really great place to work.
Yeah, I love Gorham. It's a beautiful spot, really.
Yeah.
So Sadie, you are blind. Can you tell us a little bit about what your vision is like?
Yeah, so I have a degenerative condition that's genetic called retinitis pigmentosa, which is fairly common among eye diseases. I was diagnosed with it when I was 4 years old. My parents noticed that I was having some vision issues. I have significant night blindness, which means that I can't really see anything when it gets dim or dark. My example that I give is like when the moon is full, people will go outside and they'll be like, "Oh, it's so bright out here," and I have like no vision at all, so it doesn't mean anything to me. Also colorblind, significant loss of peripheral vision, and I also am now experiencing a significant loss in central vision. And I've got some cataracts that are starting, which is common with this disease as well. So my acuity has never been great as well. It's usually ranged between like 2200 and 2800. So basically, when you think about that, if there's a sign and it's 20 feet, if it's 800 feet away and you can read it, then I need it at 20 feet to be able to see it. But my vision has escalated to the point now where that doesn't even really much, distance doesn't really much matter either. I can see some shapes, some blobs. It depends on the lighting. I can't recognize faces or anything like that, no matter how good the light is. If you walked up to me and didn't say anything, I wouldn't know who you were.
So tell me a little bit about, so having that kind of visual impairment, how does that make it possible for you to do work? I know you do some computer work. I know that because you've done that with the Greater Portland Council of Governments. You've been on computers. How does that translate into how well you can navigate digitally?
Sure. So we're fortunate living in this time that the technology has really rapidly become more accessible. And without technology, it would certainly be significantly harder to do a lot of things. I'm able to access Windows and Apple operating systems through screen readers.
So the computer will actually orally tell you what it has on the screen? Is that how it works?
That's correct. So I can navigate around using, instead of using the mouse like a sighted person would to sort of track that arrow, that pointer around and click on things, I can utilize a series of different keyboard commands that will basically do the same sort of functions as the mouse would do in clicking, and also can jump to different areas on the screen. Like if I know I'm going to fill out a form, I can put in a command that will jump to the first text box to fill in. If I know that's what it's there, I can jump through different headings depending on how different systems and web pages are set up. Some are easier to navigate than others, but on the Windows side, it's called JAWS, which is Job Access with Speech, is what it sort of stands for, but it's a screen reader. And then on the Apple side of things is VoiceOver, and that's on Mac computers as well as iPhones and iPads, things like that. Windows has also added an intrinsic screen reader that's called Narrator, that's on Windows 10 or after, which is similar. So there's a number of different ways to do that. I personally don't read Braille. I get asked that a lot because I have a degenerative condition. I kind of never bothered to read Braille, and it's actually, I think, very hard to learn. So I didn't do it, but thanks to all the screen readers, I'm able to navigate.
And so you and Kevin met when you were trying to navigate a different system. We just talked about navigating the digital system. I'm going to talk a little bit about navigating the transportation system. Kevin, I'll ask you, how did you and Sadie first meet? And then Sadie, we'll hear your side of the story.
So I got an email from GP Cog about the Ride With Me program, which just sounded interesting. And basically, as I understand it, it was going to be a Gorham resident who was using public transportation, and we have the Husky line. And it was just an opportunity to meet with somebody, a resident, and learn how they were using the public transit in Gorham and go from there. So it took a little while for us to be connected, but then we had a great day, and then we had also a follow-up day on our trail system, which was a lot of fun too. So.
And Sadie, what's your recollection of of first meeting Kevin?
Sure. So I got invited to join the Community Transportation Leaders Program, which is through Greater Portland Council of Governments, to allow different groups of people, whether they be people with disabilities, people who are new Mainers from perhaps different diverse backgrounds, different countries, who are accessing public transit, to come in and identify some what they call passion projects, maybe some transportation needs that aren't being met or could be improved, and we can work in small groups to try to work on those projects and actually obtain the skills we need to research, and then make the contacts we need to try to affect some change on that. And part of that, something that came out of that program, was the Ride With Me program, which connects the local community leaders and people who have influence on the community with these community members like myself who utilize these services to sort of give these decision makers the perspective that we see from what we have to experience in utilizing public transit that they may not be aware of.
And when we come back from the break, we are going to learn a little bit more about how Sadie sees the transportation system and how Kevin started to see it through her eyes. And right now, I'd like to remind you, you're listening to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers leading the way. I have two of them on my show today. Kevin Jensen from Gorham. He's the Economic Development Director at the town. and Sadie Donnell, who's a Gorham resident turned community advocate and who is blind and is helping us understand how she sees the world. If you have questions for Sadie or for Kevin, you can call in at 207-780-4909. Again, 780-4909. We'd love to hear from you. So, Sadie, I'd like to go back to you and hear a little bit about how you do get around the transportation system. What does your daily commute look like? What kind of ways do you get to the places that you need to go?
Sure. So I do work part-time, and I own a small business through the state of Maine's Business Enterprise Program through the Division for the Blind. I own a micro market in the state office near the jetport. So I have to get over there 3 days a week for my sort of regular job, and then sort of intermittently to run the micro market. So for my regular work as a receptionist at the Career Center, I utilize paratransit, which is a door-to-door service through the Regional Transportation Program that picks me up at my home every morning and drops me off at the State of Maine building, and then conversely picks me up in the afternoon at work and brings me home. And to access that program, my understanding is you do need to live within 3/4 of a mile of an existing bus route in order to access that. There is a fare that I pay to access that service, and that has been instrumental in allowing me to work. Without that service and knowing that I can rely on it, it would make it very difficult for me to be able to get back and forth to work. Prior to accessing that system, before the Husky Line came out to Gorham, I had to rely on ride sharing, basically putting up posters at work in previous jobs that I've had. Do you commute through Gorham? Could you give me a ride? I'll help you with gas, those types of things. And I was very fortunate in being able to find ride sharing that way, but it was very stressful because you have to have, someone that you rely on, and then you have to have a backup plan and a backup plan for your backup plan because people go on vacation or they call out sick and things sort of happen. So it can be very stressful. I also do access the public bus, sometimes to get into Portland. I don't tend to use it as much to get to work just because the commute time would be so long. It's kind of prohibitive to try to use it to commute to work.
So like from Gorham where you live to the airport or to the building that you're going to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah, it would take me quite a bit of time and a transfer of buses to get over there. So thankfully I can utilize that paratransit and essentially have a close to normal commute like most people do, getting picked up door to door. Because I would also have to walk to access the Husky Line as well. So having done that when I lived in Portland, weather conditions in Maine being as various as they are, you get icy sidewalks in the winter or downpours or, all those different types of things. So, it's about a half a mile from my house to the bus stop. So it's a decent walk.
To navigate that walk.
Exactly.
So my understanding is that you and Kevin went for a walk. Mm-hmm. In Gorham. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about how that walk started and how you started to see the infrastructure around you?
Yeah, so Sadie actually lives probably a 5-minute walk for me from my office, and the route we took was the route that she had chosen in order to get safely from her house to the Husky Line bus stop. And it basically would pass by my the municipal office. So I think the most insightful thing about it was that I was most familiar with this walk because I'm right around there, and it was eye-opening to just kind of learn that no sidewalk is the same. The roads that we have are it's very car-centric. And so that presents challenges for someone in Sadie's position to safely navigate it. And in my role working with the town, it highlighted that there were areas where challenges with where the sidewalks are located, where people are parking, and where the town, and for one example, needed to be more vigilant about enforcing some of the no parking that was in place for a good reason.
And tell us a little bit about that example.
It's by the high school, and we have a lot of activities that take place at the high school, and so there's one section of that goes around a corner. It's a bit of a blind corner, so there's no parking allowed there for that reason. But at various times during the week or during a day, people have been parking there. I think after our conversation and our walk, it was pretty apparent that was a real challenge and a safety concern for Sadie and for others, because she's not the only one that's using that path. There's dog walkers and just other people that are using that route. And so to go around that turn, to have cars parked on that side of the road, it was a dangerous situation. So we just needed to step up some of the enforcement there.
And Sadie, when you decided to take Kevin out for a walk and you decided where to take him, what did you hope that he would take away from that experience?
Just an awareness of my perspective. And I'm only one person and I only have my own perspective of things. But people don't, and I said this to Kevin on the walk, you wouldn't know this unless I told you, right? Like you can take a walk and close your eyes and, kind of sort of have an experience. But until you really understand what someone's individual challenges are, you wouldn't know that. I get around fairly well. I have a guide dog that I use, and sometimes I use a white cane. And we do quite well. But that doesn't mean there aren't stresses involved with different areas. Just crossing my own street, I live on a very busy street. So, and people tend to go above the speed limit. So, it's a challenge just to get across that street.
Tell us about how you do that. Like, walk us through how you walk across the street.
So, sure. So it's
if you can't see the oncoming traffic.
Right. It's all listening. Right. So when I come to the end of my driveway, I do live on a bit of a straight stretch, which is nice, but I have to listen. And for my own safety, and because cars these days, especially electric vehicles, are very quiet, if not silent, I have to listen very closely. And I try to make sure before I cross the street, I might even hang back before I come to the edge of the road. And I try to wait for it to really be very silent before I cross the road out of an abundance of caution. There are no crosswalks where I am, so it's just a straight street crossing. And another point to sort of throw in here is Maine does have what's called a white cane law, which means if you see as a motorist a blind person with a guide dog or a cane trying to cross the street, regardless of if they're in a crosswalk or not, you are obligated to stop for that person crossing the street to let them cross.
That seems like common sense, but it's good that it's actually codified in the law.
Right, and most people don't know that. They don't seem to teach that in driver's ed or anything like that. So a lot of people are not aware of that, and they think I'm just jaywalking or whatever the term is. But
they may not know that you are blind.
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
So they have to pay attention to having a dog with you, although lots of people have dogs, so that would also be a challenge for a motorist to see, right?
Exactly. They may not notice that I use two different types of harnesses when I'm walking, depending on what I'm doing. I may use the more traditional leather harness that most people have seen with a guide dog with the handle, but I also access the trails, as Kevin mentioned, near my home. And when I do that, I use a different type of harness that's called like a running or trail harness. And it's more of a vest style harness with a sort of single arm coming out of the back. And it does say guide dog on the side. But again, if you're going 35, 40 miles an hour, you may not see that text on the side of that as you approach until the last minute. But so when I am crossing the street, it is very much a challenge to listen and really make sure. And if the other thing that motorists aren't necessarily aware of when they're in their cars with their air conditioning on or whatnot is that there may be ambient noise. If my neighbor is mowing their lawn, I may not be able to hear the cars. So I've had numerous situations where there's been maybe a truck that just went by and was very loud, and I'm waiting for that truck to sort of get beyond so it's quiet again so that I can hear, and a car may have stopped for me and I didn't hear them. And I know that has caused some frustration for motorists because they don't understand why I'm still standing there when they've stopped and, their engine may be idling and that truck is still making noise and I didn't hear them. And then they may get frustrated and sort of take off again. And, they just don't understand the situation. So I've sort of tried to post on Facebook about it a little bit here and there and sort of mention, maybe as you approach, if you're going to stop, you give me a couple quick friendly bops on the horn, or, I've had people roll down the window and say, I'm going to stop for you, or, something like that, an audible cue so that I can then,
That's a great tip for motorists to roll down the window and let you know exactly what they're doing.
It's a nice way to say hi to people, too.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, you're listening right now to Let's Connect, and I'm here with Sadie Donnell, a Gorham resident who is blind and has been a community advocate working to improve transportation in her neighborhood and beyond in the region, and also with Kevin Jensen, who is the Economic Development Director at the town of Gorham. And I'm just really glad to hear more about your experiences, Sadie. And Kevin, I want to hear a little bit about what it was like for you to think about the dangers that a Gorham resident who you serve is facing every day as she goes out to just live her life.
Well, first I want to give a little thank you to my colleagues, Georgia Humphrey and Jeff Knox, who came with us on both of the walks, and I think that's been great because we were able to capture that, and they put a great piece together. I think it's on our website, gorhammaine.org.
This is a video?
It's a video of our walk, both walks, I guess, because then we did our follow-up into our trail system, which another plug for Gorham is that we've got 50 plus miles of trails in Gorham, so come on out.
Yeah, I actually had one of your counselors, Rob Lavoie, on a few weeks back to talk about the work that he is doing to expand the trail network in Gorham. So tell us a little bit about your trail walk then. Well, I'll start with you, Kevin.
So what was fascinating for me was on our initial walk, I learned from Sadie that she could actually use the trail system because Sadie will be able to describe this, but I think people have used open software to put in the trails on Google Maps, I think it is.
Open source maps.
Mm-hmm. And so then she's able to use that to go for walks and use those trails just like everybody else. So we were taking our walk back there, and we were getting guidance from your phone as we were walking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how is it for you to be out on the trails? Does it feel safer than on the roads?
Yes. There's no cars, right? So
right.
the worst thing I have to worry about on the trails is a bear or a deer, right?
Yeah, so. yeah. We don't have that many bears around, so that's good.
But every once in a while. But no, so I'd rather deal with a bear than a car, I think.
That's a quotable.
Just bring snacks. So no, it's really great. I'd always access the trails since I've lived in Gorham, but I've always had to go with someone. And then, I found this app. Microsoft had put out this app that was originally called Soundscape as a sort of a free project for blind people. It's a GPS system using open source maps. And it basically calls out one of the things that it does several things, but one of the main things it does is calls out intersections. So as I approach an intersection, when I have this app open, it will call out the upcoming intersection a little bit before I reach it so that I know what cross streets I'm coming to and things like that. And I just happened to turn it on when we were out on the trails, and I said, I wonder if these are mapped. And I turned it on, and sure enough, as we approached intersections in the trail, it would call out those intersections with the trail names.
Oh, that is really great.
It was fantastic. And what that meant was now I could use those trails independently. I could go out when I wanted with my dog and use those trails and navigate on my own and know where I was. It took a little bit of getting used to. There were a couple of times where I got a little turned around and actually had to call home on FaceTime once and say, can you look around and see which direction I'm heading in? Because I'm at this intersection and I'm a little confused which way I need to go. But once I got used to it, it's just been amazing to be able to go out there. I have a couple favorite spots that I showed Kevin that I really like to go to. There's a little brook that runs through there, and it's kind of a quintessential babbling brook. And I love to go out there with the dog and just kind of stop for a minute and listen to the brook and have a little moment, and just peace. And it's been so nice to just walk out there and be able to go for that walk and be stress-free, get some exercise my dog. And I've met a lot of really friendly and awesome people out on that trail. So many people out there are just great. The mountain bikers, the other people with walking out there and with their dogs. And, if I hear a mountain bike coming, I try to jump out of the way and yield to them. But they've just been really great about, saying hi. And, there's 3 of us more coming behind, or, I'm coming up behind you or whatever it is, dinging their little bells or whatnot. It's just been great.
That's right. Great community building. Yeah, I remember when I was speaking with Councillor Rob Lavoie, he was also talking about how the trails really help the local economy. And Kevin, you work with a lot of the businesses in Gorham. Can you tell us a little bit about how they feel about the transportation system in Gorham, and either about trails or how providing more safety for people with disabilities is good for business, anything like that? Do you hear from them?
Mostly for the businesses. I will say in terms of the trails, what we're trying to focus more attention on is that I think 90% of those trails are within just a couple miles of our village center. So the idea is that you can go for a ride and then come back into town and get a snack afterwards. But my conversations with Gorham businesses, it largely centers around proximity to major highways and how fast they can get to the highways from there. But we're also thinking about it in terms of the workforce for our Gorham businesses. How can everybody's having a hard time hiring people. If we're able to be connected with public transit, so that someone who maybe has no car or one car and their partner is using that car, and they live in Westbrook or Portland, they can use Portland public transportation to come to a job that's out in Gorham. So we look at it as being connected to the greater Portland region. And I think public transit especially is a big part of that. It's one of the issues that we're trying to address in terms of transportation. But it's great to have the Husky line for now and hopefully build off of that.
And we're almost at the end of the show, so I'm about to get to my magic wand question for both of you. But before we do, can we do like a shameless plug for the transit workshops or transit outreach that's happening today in Gorham?
Yeah, sure.
About that?
So Gorham has a weekly food truck event at Little Falls Recreation Area. It's in the North Gorham area, where we have it's a rotating group of food trucks, but we also invite community groups to come out there and table at the event. To engage with a captive audience of 500 plus people that come out each week. So this week we'll have GPCOG and maybe some of the consultants from the Rapid Transit Study Group that is looking at basically a boost of the Husky line from Portland through Westbrook and into Gorham. So looking to really engage the community there and get their feedback on it.
So come out and have some snacks and share your opinion about getting real rapid transit service out to Gorham.
Yeah.
So Sadie, I'm going to start with you. Rapid fire. If you could make a change in Maine or in Gorham that would improve the safety for people with disabilities, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a broad question. I think obviously, in terms of a legislative perspective, money can solve a lot of problems, right? So if we can invest in our transportation network and in our infrastructure, and I mean, we're talking like soup to nuts here, really, because it starts with pedestrian travel, because you need to be able to get to that bus stop. Like, in the last couple of years, they've put sidewalks on my street, for example, and that has just made an enormous difference. It cut my route to the bus in half.
Yeah, sidewalks are huge.
Yeah, my street is busy, as I mentioned. I would not walk down my street alone. There's no way. But now that there are sidewalks, the safety is vastly improved, and that's something I'm comfortable doing now. So I can walk that shorter route and more easily access that bus.
But Sadie, we're having to wrap up, so I'm going to say first, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Kevin, it's been a blast to see you again here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
I also want to thank Joshua Brister, who is our sound engineer, and WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work that's happening in our communities with great people. Until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Christina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.